Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our farm carbon audit on Unpacked, our Unpacked webinar series. My name is Jane Simpson, and I'm the training and events coordinator. Next slide. So we will be unpacking the farm carbon audit this evening, and initially we've got Marcus on the call on the webinar. It's Marcus Fox. He's an independent advisor from SRUC, and he's going to provide an overview of the carbon audit. He'll start with the basics of what it is, why you might use one, and what you might do with the results. And then we have two farmers, so a big thanks to them for spending their evening with us tonight. We've got Steve Dunning and Louise Rawling, and Steve and Louise are going to share examples of what they've done on their own farm. They're going to talk about the farm carbon audits they've done, how they used them, which one they've used, and the benefits of implementing those. Steve's got a dairy and a sheep farm just outside T-Bay, and Louise has an upland farm, is part of an upland farm family in Ennerdale. And we've also got with Steve, we've got Claire Foster. She's a farming officer from the Lake District National Park. And we've got Robin in the background, who's running all our admin and IT. And I just want to thank them all for their time tonight. Really appreciate the time and effort that you've put into this in terms of the slides that you've produced, the photographs that you've shared, and as I say, the time you're spending tonight. And if you've any questions, do pop them in the chat and we will answer those questions when we at the end of each session. So Marcus will do his first session and we'll have a set of questions, Steve, and then we'll have a set of questions, and then Louise, and we'll have a set of questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Marcus. Thanks very much, Marcus. And next slide, please.
Thanks. So good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Fox, and I work for Scottish Rural University College. As a farm advisor, I would say probably a good 50% of my work at the moment is helping farmers carry out carbon audits. Generally, we're either getting contacted by individual farmers that are wanting to carry them out, but a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is actually for bigger organisations such as estates, banks. We've got at the moment we've got Albert Bartlett's potatoes, Branston potatoes that are requesting their suppliers to carry out carbon audits. We are an independent organisation, and although yes, it says Scotland in the title, we do work in England as well. I think there's about 300 agricultural advisors, and that they're anywhere from up the top of Scotland to down in Norfolk. So it is a big organisation. We've got the research farms as well at the colleges, and if you just have a look at the picture there, that's one of the methane chambers, or there's 3 of the methane chambers that we use to measure methane emissions from cows. They look like giant walking fridge freezers. They're pretty interesting. As well, I would imagine most people have heard of SRUC from the animal health testing for premium cattle health schemes, sheep and goat health schemes. That's probably one of the biggest things we do, especially south of the border, as well as disease surveillance as well. So yeah, next slide, please, Robin. So effectively, what is a carbon audit? Well, it's basically it's a measurement of methane emissions coming from that farm business. Not just methane emissions, methane emissions, nitrous oxide emissions, and CO2 as well. And all of those emissions are measured as a carbon equivalent, and they're all given what's known as a global warming potential score, as it were. Carbon being worth 1, methane off the top of my head, I think is that 23 times more potent than carbon, and then you've got nitrous oxide, which I think is 296 times more potent than carbon. That is how it's measured, and effectively what we're looking at in a carbon audit is I compare it to a carbon cash flow. What we're looking at is we're looking at the amount of emissions coming in and the amount that's going out. What we are not doing is looking at what is in the soil already. It's effectively like a balance sheet. So we're not looking at what's in the savings account already. We're just looking at that flow of carbon in and out of the business, and that is ultimately a carbon audit. In terms of what data is required, it's everything from livestock numbers, land area, crop output, fuel use, electricity use. If you're a dairy farm, for instance, it would be milk production, lamb sales if it's a sheep farm. But what we aren't asking for is how much money you've spent on fuel or fertilizer or electricity. We're looking at kilowatts, we're looking at litres, we're looking at tons of feed, for example. As interested as I am in how much money you've been spending on feed, that for the purpose of a carbon audit, this is not what we're asking for. Yeah, next slide, please, Robin. And yeah, ultimately, why are we doing a carbon audit? Well, the UK government has signed a contract, a legally binding contract to make the country net zero by 2050. The NFU actually, they've put a target on there for 2040. And as part of this legally binding contract, big businesses have to submit a set of carbon accounts each year, and they rely on people further down the supply chain to actually provide the carbon footprint that's associated with their product in order for these big businesses to generate an overall carbon footprint of their business. So as time goes on, a lot of this responsibility is going to start getting passed further and further down the supply chain. From a sustainability point of view, obviously, if we're farmers, we're wanting to protect that farm for the next generation. And, you know, it's been more obvious how, you know, extreme the weather has started to get over the past decade. You know, we're getting wet winters, we're getting drier summers, and ultimately, you know, that is making it more and more difficult to farm. You also find that, like I was saying before, people in the supply chain are asking farmers to carry out carbon audits, but quite often they're not. They're actually offering a bit of a premium for these products as well. So, you know, if you can provide a carbon audit, chances are, whether it might be the milk buyer, it might be, you know, the likes of Branston potatoes that I've been working with recently, you know, they will give you a bit of a premium for that product. And I would say, for me personally, the biggest reason for doing it is because it helps you identify parts of the business where you could improve efficiency and you could improve profitability, which ultimately is going to affect the bottom line. It's going to affect profitability. And as someone who, you know, works with farmers day in, day out, I look at farm accounts, having a carbon audit sitting alongside that is really handy to try and paint this overall picture of where we could make improvements, because just having a set of farm accounts in front of me doesn't give me all the information I need. So having a carbon audit as well is actually really, really helpful. Robin, next slide, please. So yeah, we get asked all the time, you know, which carbon calculator should we be using? We're associated with AgriCalc because Scottish Agricultural College did help to develop that. But I am completely independent, and you know, whether it's AgriCalc, Farm Carbon Toolkit, Cool Farm Tool, you know, all have their pros and cons, and a lot of it is down to personal preference. But in terms of questions to be asking, you know, if you've been asked to do one by the milk buyer, for instance, you know, what is the one that they're wanting to use? Other things to consider as well is, you know, does it meet that standards for calculating emissions? Does it does it meet the IPCC, has 2050 ISO specifications, and as well, does it cover all of the farm's enterprises? And when I say enterprises, that could be beef, sheep, dairy, it could be arable, and specifically, I got asked, to do one on poppies. And there are many carbon calculators that have a facility within that to focus on poppies, for example, as an enterprise. So yeah, it's all about what does the milk buyer or the supplier want, and has it got all the enterprises in there? Next slide, please, Robin. And just a bit of the pros and cons. These are sort of the big three. These are the three carbon calculators that most people will be using. All has the pros and cons. Cool Farm tool. It's a good one. It's easy to use. It should be fairly straightforward to get your head around. If there was a con to that one, I would say that it shows the emissions per enterprise, but actually calculating all the emissions from the farm as a whole tends to be a bit more challenging with Cool Farm tool. AgriCalc, very detailed, goes into a lot of depth, which might require a bit more input and might require a bit more effort. And then Farm Carbon Toolkit, again, it's fairly straightforward to use. One thing that it does do that others don't is it accounts for capital items such as tractors and machinery. Maybe not quite as detailed from a diet perspective, but that's just a brief overview of those three. But a lot of it's down to personal preference.
Marcus, can I interrupt? Would that be okay? So in the chat, Bill Grayson has said that we have done several carbon audits using a variety of different tools, and that they've all given different results. Is that something you've any thoughts on?
I mean, we have had that in the past, but just recently, it is being agreed that everything's starting to be more standardized now. So they are starting to develop these tools now where you could actually physically copy that data from AgriCalc, for instance, into Cool Farm Toolkit and get the same results. So hopefully before too long we should be able to cross platforms and get the same results.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Robin. So what does the data show us then? So you've filled in your carbon audit. You can find out what emissions the farm is producing as a whole, how those emissions break down per enterprise, whether that's the beef side of the business, dairy, sheep, and also where those emissions are coming from in terms of which gases and which input. Is it fuel, is it electricity, or is it feed? If we just go to the next slide, please, Robin. Not only do we get to see where those emissions are coming from, we can then take that data and benchmark against other farms. And if we are looking at picking a carbon calculator, I would say make sure that we've got a lot of farms in that benchmarking pool. The more farms there are, the more reliable the data is that we can then be comparing our results to. And so this is an example of a beef and sheep farm that I've done in the past. And if we couldn't just pop back to that slide before, Robin, sorry, briefly. If we see here that the gas that's being emitted the most on this farm is methane, and that is coming from feed digestion. Now, if you initially look at that, you might think, oh, that's a problem. That is something I need to be tackling. But if we go to the next slide, please, Robin, again, when we actually then compare that against other farms, we actually look, emissions from feed digestion is half that of other farms that we're comparing ourselves against. And the reality is that it's a livestock farm. That is going to be our biggest greenhouse gas. And there is not a hell of a lot that we can actually do about it. And if we look at that compared to other farms, you know, our emissions from feed use are from enteric fermentation is very, very low. So there is limited opportunity here to reduce it further. So then we need to be looking at, well, where is the opportunity? And two of the bigger two that stand out to us here is fuel and electricity. When we're comparing that to other farms, and then we can then say to ourselves, well, as part of that, what can we do to reduce our fuel use, to reduce emissions from electricity? Well, we could be looking at things such as renewable energy. We could be looking at upgrading machinery to more fuel efficient tractors. We could be looking at one pass equipment. If we're ploughing, can we cultivate and drill at the same time? Could we be installing LED lights in livestock housing, or using heat recycling pumps in the dairy, for example, or variable speed driven vacuum pumps? From benchmarking, that then allows us to actually, you know, work out what can we do and what can't we do. Yeah, next slide, please, Robin. And just another example here. So fuel and electricity gave us the biggest opportunity for improvement, but you know, purchase feed use as well. There is also a bit of an opportunity there for us to reduce purchase feed, maybe not quite as easily as maybe fuel and electricity, but there is an opportunity there. And in terms of what we could potentially do, well, you know, we could look at improving pasture quality. So we're relying less on energy from purchase feeds. You know, could we reseed? Herbal layers are a good one. Could we be aerating, using sward lifters to try and break up the soil and create the grass to grow more efficiently? Could we incorporate clover into the grass sward as well? We take multiple cuts of silage. This is just a very you know, short list of things that we could potentially be doing. But in terms of benchmarking, this allows us to actually then focus on some of these mitigations. And that is everything for my section, I think, Robin.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Marcus. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. If anybody has anything else, please, any questions for Marcus, please do pop them in the chat now. Andy said, surely it's important to clarify none of those are measurements. They're all estimations based on modelling.
Yeah. I mean, they are all obviously taken from the set standards for calculating emissions. Which would be IPCC and past 2050.
Okay. And I think we had, but yeah, another question. Presumably buyers are less keen to offer a premium price for your product if your carbon audit result is unfavourable.
I mean, I haven't experienced that at present. I think buyers are wanting farmers initially to carbon audit to get a bit of a baseline to begin with. And there is the incentive there to get a baseline to start with, and then, you know, as time progresses, I think we'll be looking at ways that we could potentially be reducing those emissions. But at the moment, it's just getting that baseline.
Great, thanks, Marcus. And we're going to move on then to Claire and Steve. Steve, thanks very much.
Hi, good evening, guys. Thanks for being asked to do this. So I'm going to crack on because there isn't that much time, really. We started doing carbon footprinting in 2012. We are First Milk members, but our dairy customer is Nestle, and it was in their interest to work straight away with seeing what our carbon footprint was on the farm and working with us to try and lessen it. Originally, it wasn't too difficult, but it gets harder as you go on. But I'll go back to farm sizes, 400 acres. We have fell rights on Turby Common. Our stocking rate's 180 dairy cows and about 115 or 20 replacements. So I said when we started in 2012, and it became very apparent right from the start that And it's just what Marcus has said, the more efficient you are in your business, you can lessen your carbon footprint. So we just started in 2012 with Janus RMS, which is a technician walking the cows every day to get our cows working as well as possible for fertility and for getting them back in calf again. A cow in a dairy system that isn't producing the milk it should be is expensive, not only to my pocket, but also to my carbon footprint. So it's in my interest to get all our heifers back in, get them in calf as fast as we can, calve down at 2 years old. We have a tight calving pattern at present moment of about 382 days, which is another big thing for carbon, because the tighter we keep that calving pattern, then there's less cows wandering around not producing milk. And because we have heifers coming in all the time, we don't have stale cows kicking around for long. They soon go. If I'm not explaining myself very well, we can come back to it afterwards. Our carbon footprint at present moment is the 23 one, and that's because in another 6 weeks we'll be getting our 24 one. But our 23 one was 1.04 kilograms carbon to 1 kilogram of fat, protein, and corrected milk. So that's our footprint at present moment. It's 104 kilograms of carbon we make to produce 1 kilogram of fat and protein. 69% of our footprint for our carbon is from the cattle breeding and what comes out the other end of them, and we know that. And that's the difficult one to try and do anything with, as what Marcus said. But the one that's missed to me all the time is that methane actually breaks down in 7 years. It's the nitrous oxide ones that's the problem. And that's the one we're going to have to try and see where we go to. I don't know. We get them round to the farm. We put in a large slurry store in 23. And some of our carbon footprint doesn't look very clever because we use farm diesel and everything to build it. But it's there now, and it's our way forward for being able to collect all our slurry and not have to spread it until we really need it. So we've got 7 months of ability to hold on to that and use it at the right time. That lessens our carbon footprint, because when we spread that, it's going onto the land when it's warm. The plants are wanting to grow, and they're taking all the things we need to make the grass grow. So our carbon footprint's much less because of that. And that hasn't come in yet, because it'll come in our 24 one. The other things that we've done, we started 3 years ago with cow tracks. So maybe if we want to move on to the next slide, please, we might be able to. No, we're not. We're on something else. So Nestle put in a lot of interest, and we've worked with them very closely to be able to get an idea what the sequestration value of the carbon is on the farm. And as you can see, there's a machine here that actually takes a core of 1 meter down. No, nobody else does this. So what we found is when you dig a hole and you go into it, there's quite a lot of carbon on the top. There's a bit in the middle, there isn't very much, and there's a lot of carbon when you get down to about just short of 1 meter. And that's for the simple reason the worms and everything are doing what they do. Shall we move on the next one, please? So this is the machine that does it. Nestle spent all the money doing this, and every farm, there's 51 in our area that goes into Dalston, and then there's another 60 odd farms up in there who go to the chocolate chip factory. So if we pass on to the next one, please. That's the machine. The next one, I think, is probably the interesting one. So here we see it working. So that's a meter core it's taken out now. He's got it in there. He collects it, and it goes into a big tube. And on our farm, you took nearly 3/4 of a ton of core samples on all the farm to see exactly where we are for carbon sequestration. The idea is, I think it was 3.5, 4 years since we did this. There's another year to go, and then he's going to come and do it again, and we can work out what the sequestration of carbon on the farm's been and how it probably helps how we think it was done. So I think Peter's got an idea, but there is another machine about like that does anything like that. So we can maybe move on again, should we?
That's it. It's finished.
So a big part of working with Nestle, what we found out is that actually it's quite interesting to dig holes and see what's in there, because everything we do now at Raisgill is about soil health. The where we graze the cows, the way we spread the slurry, it's all about trying to look after the worms and the dung beetles and all the microbes in the soil that make it work. Because let's face it, if there was no worms, there wouldn't be us, there wouldn't be world, there wouldn't be people. So worms are extremely important, and we've learned over the last few years through Nestle that working with nature, working with the soil health, is very good for the farm. It's very good for carbon sequestration, but also it puts us in a situation where we now do rotational grazing. So if we pass on to the next one. Oh, that's actually digging the hole when we went down, and they were showing us that there was carbon at the top, that there's not so much carbon in the middle, and there's a lot of carbon when you get farther down. And that works with the dung beetles and the worms and everything, taking the carbon down through into the soil. And once it's down there, that's it, trapped. That's it. You've got hold of it. It isn't going to get away. The worrying bit, the thing that Nestle came through to us, and we'll see later on, is because we put a lot of herbal layers in now, is the fact that when you plough the top bit, you lose all that carbon straight away. So you don't want to plough. It's all about scratching seed in, and you'll see that later on.
Those worms, Steve, what area did they come
So all them worms came out of 1 square metre.
Can you remember how many there were?
I think there was something that like about 150, 160. But we have a lot of dung beetles as well, and that comes with the rotational grazing, because when you're rotational grazing, we've got this. We can maybe go on to the farm tracks now, should we?
I think you're on herbal layers next.
Oh, sorry, we're on herbal layers. We're talking about herbal layers. So we got interested in herbal layers, obviously, when the government put the nice little thing in front of us, said we'll pay you such and such, you've got herbal layers in. So we've gone on to herbal layers. We have about 56 acre in now. Now we're fairly high up, so I was a bit open-minded as to how long these herbal layers would last, but actually they're lasting longer than I thought, because we are quite high up. This particular land you're looking at now is about 800 foot above sea level, but we do sit on limestone, so it's free draining. So basically this is 2 paddocks. We cut the grass on what the cows are left behind, and this is my grandson spreading it out before we move in and start scratching it up with big discs. So maybe we should move on to the next one. So that shows what we're after, about 4 or 5 passes with these discs that we've got, and a thing on the back which levels it up. We finish up with something that we can put seed into. So
That's a video, isn't it?
that is a video, I
Is
think.
that
Yes.
Play, Robin? That's it.
Well, you see him going across the land there and scratching it all up. It takes a bit of work to do, but once you've got it, you haven't lost the carbon out through ploughing. So that's quite interesting, really. Actually, the grass, you can see this side of it, that's some of the herbal layer we put in 2 years ago, but we just took a cut off that, so you can't really see the layers coming through. Right, we can move on again. So this is the cow tracks we started to put in 3 years ago. We, as you can see, basically what it is, we dig the topsoil out, make it a level track, and then we're lucky because we live close to the River Loon, and there's a big gravel bed that the Environment Agency let us take gravel off. So we've been lucky enough to be able to use all this back gravel to put in a base, and then we put
Sports pitch stuff.
Yeah, it's sport. What there's a word for it though, isn't there? AstroTurf. And we get the AstroTurf for free. We just have to pay the transport. So what we do is we dig the topsoil out. We put about 18-inch to 2 foot of gravel in. Then we hammer it all down, pack it down with a vibrator roller, and then we roll out the AstroTurf on top. The cows absolutely love it. It's just amazing to me how the cows' feet have improved. I always thought my cows had problems in winter because they're on concrete. What I didn't realise was they had problems in summer when I thought they're out on nice grassy. They were going through gateways all the time with the stones. The feet were getting bruised. They come in and then we started to get these lesions in the hoof and lame cows. It sounds awfully big-headed and I shouldn't say it, but I don't think we hardly have a lame cow on the farm now out of all the 180. And any we do gets very little problem. So it's been a real push forward for us on cow feet and their ability to be happy walking around and being as natural as they can be. But also it puts us in a situation where we now can rotate through 24 paddocks that we have, and each paddock lasts 3 milkings, so 36 hours, as long as the grass is growing, as long as it isn't too dry. We're only into the 3rd year of it now, so there will be a hiccup time when it's too dry and the grass doesn't grow, but we'll just have to have a backup with round bales if we need them. But one of the best things that's happened at Razorgalow, apart from maybe the slurry pit, but I think the best thing is the cow tracks. They've just been brilliant, and it makes us put us in a position where the soil's much better off, the farm's much better off, the cows are much better off, and we get this rotational grazing which will sequester more carbon than if we're just on a set stocking system. The other interesting thing, of course, is I can get on my iOS and say these fields sequester more carbon than trees ever will. There, I've said it. Do you want to move on now? So that's son and grandson just showing 3 generations. There's Frankie there showing when you roll out the AstroTurf now, it used to be sand and it was quite slippy. But if you can see in his hands, they're little rubber ball bearings, if you will. And what that does is it sits in among the AstroTurf and stops it moving around when the cows are walking on it. Because I was kind of uneasy when we started, you start putting 180 cows up and down a track twice a day, that it'll actually move because the cow's feet will move it. But it doesn't, it stops still. Even on hillsides, it stops still. So that's my grandson Frankie showing the little rubber ball bearings that's in among it that holds it in place. That's my son Michael, who seems to be interested in taking on the overdraft, so I'm quite happy about that as well. Right, shall we move on? This is a video just of putting the cow tracks out and walking up it really. That's when it was first finished. Right, okay.
This is a video as well.
So we can move on again. So this is coming to the end of what I've been talking about. This is the cows going out after evening milking. You can see them walking up the cow track and then along across the top field and going after graze. I had a lot more to say really, and probably I've said enough. I don't know.
You've still got a bit of time, so go for it.
One of the things we've really found out about is we were talking at the start about these cows. They need to be in peak positions for milking all the time. We need to get the heifers back in calf and get them in, because the sooner we get them back in the milking parlour, the milk they produce offsets the carbon that they're emitting. So 5 years ago, we looked at the whole herd genetically to see which was the best cows and which were the worst cows. Not necessarily on milk production, but the ability for different genes within their cows to be able to pass on the ability to use silage feed more efficiently than other cows. So what we found out was we've got the best 30% of the herd genetically, who were producing the most milk and the best butterfats and proteins and we started breeding our heifers only off them. So we've been doing that for 5 years now, and for the last 12 years, we've moved our genetics forward really quickly because we've just used the heifers to breed heifer calves to replace the herd with from the heifers coming in, because they're our best genetics. And we put all them to sex semen. So 99% of those animals have a female. So we've moved the herd forward really fast genetically. But now we're moving it faster again for the simple reason, now the top 10, 15, 20% of those 30% that we put him back to black and white, put him back to Holstein, we now know which is the best ones of them, so we can track them through the herd on something called a scatter graph. And you can see within 2 lactations of those heifers coming in, they are the top cows in the herd already. So basically, we can lose our carbon footprint we can lessen our carbon footprint by having a more and more genetically positive herd, efficient herd for producing much more milk and protein and fat off the same food as a cow that wouldn't use it just as efficiently. So that's the thing I'm really excited about at present moment, is the fact that we now, through being able to use all these genetic traits, push the herd faster forward, make it more profitable. And as Marcus said earlier on, all these things you do to fit in with carbon actually makes the business more profitable. I was very open-minded when we started, but it really works through, and it focuses you onto the bits of the farm or the bits of your business that makes you money. And usually, if you're being as clever as you can be with carbon, the profits go up. We've also looked at the electricity, but on our carbon footprint, toolkit footprint, and I've got it in front of me, I mean, electricity is only 1% of the whole thing. You know, the real carbon problem is what comes in and what they breathe out. But, you know, we can't do a great deal about that. But we've done all the stuff with putting variable speed pumps in, and we've got a new milking pile. It's 5 years old now. We can milk 120 cows an hour. So we're using the electricity as efficiently as we can. But the next thing we're looking at now is to actually put on photovoltaics on the roof, put batteries in, and cut our electric usage by about 82%. The thing is, when we started on this trip, the things we had to do were fairly cheap, and you soon got the benefits back. As you get farther into it, you look at photovoltaics and this sort of stuff, you know, you're talking 50,000 quid to do this, and you won't get as much back as fast as far as your carbon footprint is concerned. You will do financially on your electricity bill, hopefully, but the farther you get into it, it's the more expensive things you have to do. And one of them, of course, was where we started, which was the slurry pit.
Steve, I'm really sorry.
Brilliant.
But it's,
I told you to shut me up.
There's such an incredible amount of information here, and he's brought all his audit stuff with him, and I'm sure we could have just had you as the sole speaker, and I don't because it's really all really interesting, fascinating stuff, and you've obviously done loads of work on this over the years. But we have got some questions for you, so I'll let Jane take over.
Yeah, thanks so much. I can echo that, Steve. Thank you. So yeah, we've got a question. What herbal ley mixtures did you use? Which species did well and which not so well for you?
Right. We looked at the herbal layers we looked at the herbal layers that had the biggest amount of ryegrasses we were allowed to put in with the herbal layers, because we thought the herbs won't last very long, but we get a lay in, you know, with fresh grass seed. But I have been really surprised at how some of the herbal stuff, it really does. It hangs on much longer than I ever thought it would do. I know that's not answering your question, because my son looked to that side of it. I say the herbal layers, he could tell exactly what mix is in there. So I'm not answering that very well, but we did go for the ones that had the highest percentage of ryegrass and in to basically reseed the field.
Great, thank you. And another question, how long does the AstroTurf last? And what happens when it starts to break up? You
Good
did cover a
question.
little bit of that, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I'm sat on the edge of my seat as well, watching to see. It's on its fourth year. It's on its fourth year now. It doesn't look any worse. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the good question. That's the big question. And you
Bit
have
of
the
watch this
problem.
space.
Sorry.
Watch this.
Bit of
Watch
watch this
Yeah,
space.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And then another one, grassland is sequestering more carbon than trees. Is that above or below ground?
Below ground.
Below ground.
Because as I maybe didn't explain very well, when your soil health is right, and you've got the worms and you've got the dung beetles and you've got everything else going on in there, they're taking down carbon all the time. And they're taking it down where it's actually captured. Trees, nothing against trees to be fair, but if people tell me trees are great till you cut them down, then the carbon comes up out the where you cut it off, comes out the root. I don't know whether that's true or not. But at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, we're sequestering carbon off our farm to produce food, to produce cheese, to produce milk, to work with Nestle, to feed the nation. The thing that annoys me is we aren't going to be able to eat trees.
Only the fruit, not the branches, definitely not.
Oh,
So,
I didn't tell a lie. We went to see a guy who had lots of trees in Herefordshire, and when we got down there, because we were really interested to go and see the apple trees, he was making cider.
that's always good. And then another question, thoughts on feed additives as a mechanism for reducing carbon footprint?
Right. I look more into putting bugs in the slurry to stop, to help the slurry to break down and it doesn't build up as much carbon. I don't know. I'm sure there's feeds you can put in the cattle that helps on that side of it, but it kind of backfired a month or two since, didn't it?
Just
Money.
finish over in Jen, sorry.
Sorry, go on.
I would say Steve's doing probably one of the best things that he could be doing, really, and that is focusing on genetics rather than feed additives. Because you know, if he's focusing on getting the most amount of milk, most amount of high quality milk out of the more efficient cows, that's going to improve feed conversion efficiency, and that's massively going to reduce methane emissions in terms of per litre of milk that's produced.
Yeah, you're right,
Excellent.
Max. That's what I'm interested in. Now, that's what I'm most excited about.
And then there's a couple of comments then about trees actually. So cows, somebody said cows self-medicate on willow if it's available. So trees can be very useful in that sense. And then another comment, cows that can eat tree leaves actually produce lower amounts of methane. So.
Yeah, we are working with a guy from First Milk who lives in the Netherlands, and he came over and we've been looking at planting trees on the farm. And one thing he looked at was planting willows upside of the cow tracks, and then the cows could browse on them. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. But you get 180 dairy cows coming out, and they're all looking for a bit of willow. You would need a hell of a lot of willow.
Yeah. Great. And then the
It's
final comment
absolutely
from
right. Absolutely right. In the back end, our cows, because they're out still, go mad over eating ash leaves, and that's very good for them.
Great. Well, thank you ever so much, Steve. What we're going to do is move on to Louise. We've got a couple more comments, but I'll bring those in right at the end when we do sort of final questions. Yeah, so I'm going to hand over to Louise. So welcome, Louise. Thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. And yeah, here's your first slide for the evening.
Hello, everybody. Yes, it's been very interesting so far. I'm Louise Rawlin. I farm with my son and husband in the Ennerdale Valley. That picture that you've got there is from the top of our land, and that little grey dot sort of in the middle is our farmstead. My husband, that our son lives there, and that is where most of the work goes on. My husband and I live in at Farthwaite, which is in the middle of Kinnyside Common, halfway between Ennerdale and Calder Bridge. So we're quite remote. We have fell sheep up here, and we're commoners. And in the valley, while all we run as one unit. My son is now in the farmhouse with what we call our white sheep around him, and a flock of sheep actually in the Ennerdale Valley, and he has suckler cows down at Ennerdale as well. Our white flock are composite type sheep. The first lot are the out of the Herdwick, and then we keep the females out of those and the females out of those, and we end up with about 800 white sheep that have been derived initially from the Herdwick flock, and it's those white sheep that make the money on Hollins Farm. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, why did I do a carbon audit? Well, we set off with being told, like legislation came in 2019 saying that we had to be net zero by 2050. And as a family, we thought, well, we're going to have to look and see how we're going to get to net zero. So our first look was at AgriCalc, and we did it ourselves, and we got the results. And we looked at each other and we said, shit, sorry, maybe shouldn't swear. We're nowhere going to be net zero with this. Let's have a look at a different toolkit. So we went to the Farm Carbon Toolkit. They were interested in helping us, and we actually, as a group of commoners, all of Kinnyside Common, 13 of us, would have a go at doing our carbon toolkits under the guidance of the Farm Carbon Toolkit. Another of the initial reactions to we can't go on like this, we're not going to exist, our initial reaction to the Carbon Toolkit. My son said to me, I'm not quite sure if it is just carbon. I think we need to be looking at soil. And I said, well, how do we look at soil? And he gave me Nicole Masters' For the Love of Soil book, and he said, read that first and see what you think. So I read that and I said, yes, I think that we have to change our practice, and that will help the carbon. What else do you think we should be doing? And he said, well, there's the soil food web stuff. You've got more time than me. You sign up for it and you learn about the soil, and we'll develop the farm down whatever route we think as we go along. So anyway, we did our Farm Carbon Toolkit audit, and we are livestock producers. We are upland livestock producers. We don't produce a lot of kilos of meat for the emissions of carbon that we make. We sell most of our stock store. Anything that was coming in, we just don't fit. At one point, it was, my son said, the one thing that we can do, and the one thing that is in our favour, is that we have to be if we have to be net zero by 2050, we just get rid of all the livestock and we've got it. So we can farm up till then, doing the best we can for carbon. And we know at the end of the line, we could just get rid of everything. If that's what the government want and what the population want, nobody wants any food from the uplands. We can be carbon zero in 2050, but in the meantime, let's make the best of what we can. So, our sheep spend half their lives up on the fell. Our cows spend half their lives out in the fields, and because we're a wet farm, they spend, if we're lucky, only 7 months housed inside. We have a flock of Herdwick sheep, 2 flocks of Herdwick sheep, and the white sheep that I talked about earlier. Our cows are stabilizers now. Stabilizers because of their ability to do very well off grass. So we're pasture based. These cows are chosen, the bull's chosen for his abilities, maternal productivity abilities. We have to touch wood. Last year did not carve a cow. We only have 70, but we did not carve a cow. They all got on with it themselves. We do a pregnancy diagnosed before, and anything that hasn't got a calf in it goes. And out of 78 that were went for PD, we had 2 empty. They went, and then somewhere we kept the numbers to around 70, and we didn't lose a calf. So we've chosen them for ease for us, because we're quite a big farm really for one person to be doing it, assisted by his dad and his mum. Ease of a ease for the animals. If the cow can have the calf gets up and suckles, and nobody's interfering with it. We're as near to nature as science lets us be, because these are a cow that was developed for this. Not it naturally developed for this. Nobody's done anything scientifically apart from watch and go for the traits that showed on them. Next slide, please. No. Yeah. So, what have we done? We found out that, as the speakers before have pointed out, we found out that we are working with ruminants that have evolved over the last 65 million years to eat grass, and are now being blamed for climate change. As far as the IPCC's intergovernmental panel's decisions go, methane is a very bad emission. These poor little animals, including wild deer and goats, are pumping out a lot of methane, and it's not going to work as far as climate change goes. Farmers, we don't agree with that. I've got the methane cycle at 12 years. I'm not quite sure. We can argue whether it's 7 or 12, but this is carbon that has come from the atmosphere via photosynthesis. It's producing sugars and proteins. It is making carbon go back into the soils. It's making grass grow. The ruminants are eating the grass. They are the way that they eat it makes more grass grow. And if we move them around, as we have learned is a good practice, not to stop graze, to move them on in their pastures while they're inside. When they're at the fell, it's a different matter. They choose what they're eating. We've changed our grass production. What we have actually done, we're now down to 0 chemical fertilizer this year. We had very, very little last year. We're at 0 this year. We'll see how it goes. I'm trying to see what the best thing that we can do with our whole muck is, whether it goes back on the land, whether it's composted. I'm looking into that. The benefits of doing the carbon audit have been to focus the mind. but the methane that we are producing, we can't keep the livestock and not produce the methane. I'm not quite sure how much more we can get our carbon footprint down. We've got trees around the place. We've been in stewardship schemes for 30 years. So we've got hedges around the place. We've got bits of woodland, which frighten me. But they frighten me because once you've got a bit of woodland, you've got a bit of woodland. You can't decide that it would be better not to have it because you can't get rid of it. The plan is to make ourselves more efficient and just continue, but monitor the carbon. Next slide, please. So that's what it looks like when we open the gate to let the cattle through into the next field during the summer. And that's the trees that we've got around Hollins Farm. And the other picture that you've got there is just showing you that this is our cash crop, and we sell them store. We finish very few of them, so we're not producing a lot of kilos of meat, but that is our money at Hollins Farm. And that's it.
Thanks, Louise. So there's a question here already about your white flock. The person's asking, are Herdwick, the white flock of Herdwick crossed to what? And have you
Right.
tried doing separate carbon footprints for the fell flock and the white flock? And if so, how did they compare?
No, the white flock and the white flock we use Innovis genetics. We like the Clin at the moment for our replacement females. There's a bit of Beltex goes on those that are at the end of the line for going into the food chain or for somebody else to make for the food chain. But we haven't done separate carbon audits, but we don't buy in any concentrate and we lamb everything outside, so they're all on grass. So it's either fell grass or inside grass, and we've got no. We did put a little bit of chemical fertilizer on last year, but that went on the silage ground, and the sheep don't get that. That's for the cows. So I'm not sure it would make a lot of difference. Do you know, Marcus? Would it make a lot of difference if we split it?
You're on mute, Marcus.
So, yeah.
Sorry.
To be honest, I've not actually had a farm where we've split the sheep enterprise out into two sections. So, it would be interesting to see what the difference is. But ultimately, as well, you've got to be really careful when you start to allocate emissions to each flock. You've got to make sure that the area of land, the type of land that you're allocating to that flock is accurate, because if not, it's just going to skew your benchmarking figures. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but it would be difficult.
It would be very difficult because your fell sheep are actually grazing the same ground when they're in for tuck time, when they're in for lambing time. They're in and out. They're not at the fell 12 months of the year. So yeah, we haven't tried to do that. It's just been a general audit on the numbers.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Any other questions for Louise before we move on? So just while we're waiting to see if there's any more.
Hi, Louise, Steve here. The problem is you'll be selling most of your lamb store, are you?
We are, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's like if I had a flying herd, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I could buy cows in and I wouldn't have any carbon footprint at all, because I would leave the carbon footprint with the guy that bred the cow that I bought off. And I think this is very unfair because you're in the same situation. Your style lambs are going off. The guy that buys them and fattens them and finishes them doesn't have a carbon footprint. It stops with you. You follow
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's very unfair. But that's the way it's set up. I just wanted to make a point, Louise. That was all.
Yeah, yeah. That's why it was obviously said tongue in cheek that my son said, you know, don't worry about it. We do the best we can, but we can be if we just get rid of everything, we're okay.
Yeah.
That's not what farming's about, is it? But it does seem as though things have maybe stacked a little unfairly.
And then there's a question for Marcus. Has any research been done into sheep under different systems, e.g. hill, lowland, and the emissions value of these?
Yeah, I mean, in agriculture, we do split it out between, is it a hill flock, is it a lowland, is it upland, and we do have the ability to benchmark against these other flocks, but it varies so much between farms. To say that a hill flock was more carbon friendly than a lowland flock, I wouldn't be able to do it. Generally, your hill flocks grazing a much larger area of land. So in terms of emissions per acre or emissions per hectare, it is going to be a lot lower than a lowland flock. But in terms of, because generally they're being sold at lighter weights, the amount of emissions per kilo of product is generally higher in a hill flock than it would be in a lowland flock.
I think the way that carbon seems to be measured, this is miles off, but looking at a pig unit in China that was like 15 stories high or something, and it had managed, you know, it was zero carbon because of how much meat it was producing, whereas the likes of us on our extensive upland lakeland farm have huge emissions for what, or it seems like we have huge emissions, and we're just doing what nature was doing, well, what has been done for the last 3,000 years.
And there's a question here. Could we pop some Herdwicks in your methane chamber, Marcus, to find out?
Well, actually, they have done research. I don't know which sheep breed specifically they did it on, but they had basically them little mini methane chambers that they actually carted out to the field to measure emissions from a sheep flock. But in terms of what breed it was that they were measuring, I don't know. I would imagine it was either mules or 3/4 bred. But yeah, it could definitely be done.
And then I'm just conscious we're coming towards the end now, but we have a final question and then a bit of a summary, if that's all right, Marcus. And there's another question. Wouldn't sea losses from the soil cultivations to grow forage crops or pasture reseeds cancel any gains in reduced use of feed supplements? That goes right back to your session right at the start, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it depends what your cultivation methods are really, but you can reseed a field without actually resorting to a plough. But again, it's all about balancing the pros and the cons, because if you've got a stagnant, stale pasture that isn't growing a lot of grass to feed your livestock, you know, there will come a point where you will have to go in and reseed it, or you will have to oversow fresh grass varieties into that, or potentially, I mean, if you're an arable farm, if you've got compaction that is that severe that crops aren't able to grow, you're going to have to accept the fact you're going to have to go in with a plough. And yes, you are going to release some of that carbon into the atmosphere, but in terms of what you're gaining, in terms of yields from the crops, you are likely to be better off, essentially.
So yeah, thanks everybody for that. Just as we finish off then the evening with another 5 or 6 minutes, we just wanted to point out that there has been funding for farm carbon audits in the past. So I know there's maybe some schemes that are coming up. Somebody's mentioned about different bits and bats of funding. So if you were interested in once that information is around and about, then do please use this email address and tell us that you're interested. And then if we do find out some information about funding, then we'll get back in touch with you. Next slide, please, Robin. Just wanted to advertise a couple of events coming up. There's Carbon Calling. This is established by livestock farmers Liz and Nicola, and it's to support and empower livestock farmers to set clear goals for their businesses, livestock, soils, wildlife, and their own well-being. It's the 24th to the 25th of June at Sleaston Howe. I don't know whether I've pronounced that right or not. In Kirbythorpe, Penrith. First day is a focus day. The middle day is a listen day. That's the main conference, and the last day is a curiosity day, so farm walk and a workshop. We'll send some details out in the slides about the website and how you can get access to that event. Next slide, please, Robin. There's also a your soil is your future, and there's two sessions here. One is actually, I believe, with Steve at Steve's farm. Was that right? Or to do, Steve is running one of those on the 7th of March, followed by a visit to Ray's Gill Hall farm we've got there. So a visit to his farm. So that's you can get signed up to those through the Land and Nature Skills service for those. And then next slide, please. We have some more Unpacked free webinars coming up. That's a sort of a list of them there, and you can see those on our events website. Renovation and retrofit, food waste, solar PV and electric vehicles that are coming up later on in the year. And next slide. And just the fact that we are a charity and rely on, this has been given free of charge tonight, but if you're able to make a donation, that'd be hugely appreciated. And yeah, just a big thank you to you for attending this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've had loads of questions. Thank you very much. And we will send out the presentation and a recording of the webinar in the next couple of weeks, and also send it out to the people that are registered. So yeah, if you would answer the questions. We've 7 questions, and once you've answered the first question, you just need to use the little scroll bar to the right hand side to move down to see the other questions. It should only take you a couple of minutes, and we'd really appreciate some feedback about the webinar. So yeah, thank you ever so much. I repeat again, thank you so much to our speakers tonight, giving up your evening and been very entertaining and useful. I've certainly found it incredibly interesting. So yeah, thank you very much.